Going to go ahead and get started with today's webinar on resumes and cover letters. I am so excited to introduce two incredible speakers. We are so honored and humbled to have them on today's call. And let me just tell you, I'm going to read over a little bit about their credentials just to kind of give you guys some background and perspective of the caliber of speakers that we have on this call. Really, they know their stuff, and we're, again, just so excited to have them. Marissa, Lobianco is one of the presenters on today's call. She is a resume writer with Amy Feilbaum and Associates. And a little bit about her bio and her background. She is a resume writer and coach for Amy Feilbaum and Associates with 10 years of experience providing career counseling to clients with diverse professional backgrounds. So even if you're not in hospitality and events, this is still a great webinar for you guys to be tuning into. A certified professional resume writer, Marissa currently is a career services advisor for City University of New York. So she does have a background dealing with different students. So you guys are definitely in the right place. She's heard all of the questions, and she'll be able to address them on this call as well. She holds a Master's of Science degree in counseling and has been a frequent speaker on career-related issues at national conferences, which is also incredible, and we're honored to have her. A member of several professional organizations, Marissa works closely with clients to get an understanding of their backgrounds, experience, and personalities to create tailored resumes, which is very important, that are results-oriented and showcase their clients' qualifications for their desired positions. Okay, so a lot of the things that she's going to be sharing on today's call, you can apply to any and everything that you guys are going into. So very excited to have you, Marissa. And also so honored to have Amy Feilbaum herself, the owner of Amy Feilbaum and Associates, on this call, which is amazing. And so a little bit about her background. After working in top managerial positions in the restaurant and hospitality industry for more than 20 years, Amy switched gears and decided to enter the industry's recruitment field, all right? So she's been on both sides of the equation. Amazing background and knowledge. Specifically, Amy's knowledge of the industry as an insider and ability to speak its language resulted in immediate commissions and assignments from upscale hotels and high-end restaurants in the United States and overseas, guys. So she has not only a domestic but international footprint, a lot of connections, a lot of knowledge. Major and well-known hotels and restaurants recognize one of their own and knew it would have the right focus when fulfilling their interests. So she does work for their best interests as well in filling some of these key positions. So she's worked with a lot of executives, a lot of companies, again, not only domestically but internationally as well, can provide some great higher level perspective on the other side of the equation, right? In addition to several notable achievements on the front lines, Amy has served in the industry as an executive manager for the kitchen at the 21 Club, and she has also held other top managerial positions at Sarah Beth's Kitchen, American Renaissance, and the Gramercy Tavern. Hopefully I didn't slaughter that. She is the part-time instructor also at the Institute of Culinary Education and in its culinary management program. So she also has worked on college campuses and universities as well. So with that, I am so excited. Thank you both so much for being on today's call. We are so excited to learn and gain some of your wisdom. I know you're going to be providing a lot of value to our members, so thank you both so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that introduction. We're so excited to be here. And as you said, I have my own company. I'm starting my 5th year with 7 employees, and we look for top talent in the executive field. So we're on the other side right now, hiring executive chefs, director of catering, director of HR, director of sales and marketing, interviewing for our clients in the field. So we're not just an agency that like sends a resume. We're actually like in the kitchen, presenting a chef, carrying out the food for the tasting, for the test. If it's more of a corporate role, we're interviewing with the client. So we're in the field recruiters, and I've been doing that for 10 years. But like you said before that, I've run restaurants in the back of the house, working those 18-hour days with a really strong work ethic, which you need in this industry, and you need to be like thick-skinned. Started out when I was at 14 years old at Baskin Robbins. You know, I walked 3 miles to work. I made $2 an hour, and started my career there. And then wanted to learn how to wait tables. So how do you get that experience? Well, a restaurant felt sorry for me and said, you know what, if you hook us up in the ice cream department, we'll train you as a server. And it kind of all just like led from there, like kind of growing and learning and just being a sponge, and all the restaurants that you mentioned. So I'm excited to be here because I meet with top executives all the time, resume and what the resume should be like and what the cover letter should look like. And it's the same for students. And when I'm at the Institute of Culinary Education on a part-time basis, coaching, you know, recent graduates or people that are just starting to look for an extern, and what does a resume look like? So very excited that Marissa is here because Marissa has like the scholar approach. And she is wonderful about all the details on the resume, and I'm kind of more of like in the field. I look at a resume for like 2 seconds. So what grabs my attention and what drags out. So I'm very excited that you're here, and I'll leave it to you.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to be here. So a little bit more about myself. I've been working with Amy for just about a year now. But before that, it's been actually over 10 years now that I've been working with a diverse group of students. So my passion is to be helping students. And I met Amy while at the Institute of Culinary Education, working with hospitality management, culinary, pastry and baking students, and I was a career advisor there. And currently, I am a senior career advisor at a large urban university in New York City, and doing the same types of things where, you know, coaching people through what should their resume look like, answering all of those questions. And my experience extends also in a variety of environments, including nonprofit organizations, smaller liberal arts colleges, as well as the high schools. So I am certified to administer assessments related to career, but a large part of my work is definitely focused on resume, cover letter, interviewing, networking, as well as social media branding. I lead a lot of workshops, run career fairs, and at this point I've probably seen thousands of resumes. So I have a lot of different ideas and opinions on what really makes an effective resume and cover letter, so I'm happy to be sharing that with you today. Okay?
So let's begin.
Yeah. So we're going to just pop into a slideshow so that you can follow along with us on that. Just a moment for that to happen. All right, we're going to get that full size. All right, so let's begin.
Resumes and cover letters. Where do we go? Where do we start?
Well, we want to start really with the basics in terms of, that might sound like a basic question, but people had a lot of different conceptions of what should be on a resume, what goes on a resume, and what makes a great resume. So really the idea is more of a snapshot of your skills, and I say that because sometimes people are putting a laundry list of every single thing they've ever done, and it actually should be a lot more focused and relevant to what it is you're seeking. That being said, it should be very organized. Although many of us are creative, this isn't really the place to get too artistic because you want it to be very easy to read. You have employers looking at this, and they don't necessarily have a lot of time.
No, actually, I kind of just, you know, look at the resume for a couple seconds right before I'm going to meet the actual candidate. Or if I'm like looking through maybe 25 resumes, I'm looking at things that jump out at me. So if it's easy to read and if it's empowering me, and the information is there for me, all the better.
And the idea is, what I've heard, you know, that is a statistic, that employers are only looking at resumes for maybe less than 10 seconds. Now, if that's the case, you still need to put in a lot of time to get it to be a readable document that someone could really just scan. Because I'm sure you know what you're looking for, but is that going to be easy for someone to find that information?
Actually, more time. I think it's going to take you longer to make the simple resume than if you had the longer resume of 4 pages. Because you might start it out at 4 pages, to make it the 1-pager. So I think it's actually going to take more time.
Definitely, and the more time you put in, the easier it will be for someone to digest that information. So some key points in how to make that easy for the audience to read would be consistency. You'll see that's key as we show some samples and tidbits of a resume, that there's a certain format you'd like to follow throughout the whole document. A resume, you know, rule, and I'm very cautious about using the word rule, because there's a lot of gray area with this, and you'll see that we both have our opinions on this. There are certain rules, but you do have to afford some time for flexibility. Now, one thing that we do follow, reverse chronological order within each section. And I say within each section because that's something else that will come up in terms of how you organize your resume.
Yeah, once in a while I get a resume that like starts in 2000, and it screws my mind a lot. I'm like, why is this resume starting in 2000? So it should state where we are today, like 2014, right, Marissa?
Yes, and that's the standard. So it would be natural for you to put most recent going back in time, because that's what someone is expecting to see. And when they don't see that, that is definitely going to throw them off a little bit.
Sure. Okay.
Another point on that is personalizing it. While we will state and give you some formats and some guidelines, when it comes down to it, it really has to be something that works for you at this point in time, serves your purposes for what you're seeking.
Sure. I stay away from the resumes that look like they came from a book, that are like too standard. And I'm like, okay, or took it right from a book. But you don't want to get too creative, like you're on pink paper and you're using 16-point font. You want to keep it really like regular, right? Regular and correct and error-free.
And I think that, so error-free is huge. You definitely, want to run all of your spell check. This is your document. This is a piece of paper that is meant to present you. And it's hard to present a human being with all their complexities and interests and passions on a piece of paper. And that's why there's so much that we have to talk about today. And I think that also brings us to the point of, length, because that comes up a lot.
Yeah, and I feel that, I love the one-pager when you're a student and you have some experience, but you're really not expected to have, 20 years experience because you're a student or you're recently graduating. So the one-pager is terrific for student level. But if you have like 10 years experience or 15 years experience, you're going to graduate to like a 2-page resume. Now look, Marissa, like someone comes to meet me and they have 20 years experience, they have a 3-page resume, they meet me, I say a 3-page resume. They meet another recruiter, or a recruiter says, no, I need it on a 1-pager. So I think you have a couple of different resumes that you work from. You have your 1-pager, then you maybe have your 3-pager. Again, there's that gray area. But today you're going to talk mostly about the 1-pager.
Yeah, because that really should work for you while you're a student, and as a researcher. That could be 5, maybe even close to, as we said, 10 years of experience. It's about using the space on the page productively. So if you have enough quality information that is relevant to your career and that qualifies you for the position, and you're at that point pushing, say, 10 years, then yes, But before that, I do suggest challenging yourself to see if you can be more concise. Play around with some margins. Don't get too small on the font. As long as it's readable and accessible, you just don't want to overdo it.
Great. So let's begin. Okay. We're going to go over 6 or 7, like the resume content. So we're going to go into heading now, right? With okay. Great. So your name. Keeping it simple. What is your name? Your first name and your last name. If you have a nickname, then I would probably do it in quotations.
Or parentheses, anything indicating that that's what you'd like to be called.
Sure. Okay. So keep it simple and don't reinvent the name. Full mailing address. So I think we differ on this. If you're applying, I feel like to put your mailing address if you're applying for a job in the state where you live. But let's say you live in Texas and you're applying for a job in New York, I would probably omit the address. Because if I got a resume from someone that was living, I might say, okay, I'm not going to call them. I don't want to deal with relocation. What are your thoughts?
Well, the reality is no one's going to send you the snail mail. Right. No one's going to use it. But it has, up to this point, been a formality. It has been what employers are used to seeing. So if it isn't there, it could potentially cause a red flag. That being said, in this day and age, people are concerned about identity theft. This actually is sort of a hot debate in the realm of resume. So at this point, it's about, again, doing what's right for you. If you're applying in-state, you're there, you want them to know you're there, put that.
Yeah, today I was interviewing someone local in New York City, and they just had their number. And I was like, well, where do you live? And they're in Brooklyn. Okay, so let's put that address on. Phone number. So we see a lot of resumes with a home phone number and a cell number. So when I'm trying to get a hold of someone, I'll call the first number that I see. and sometimes it's the home number. So if I call the home number and I don't get an answer, I may not even call the cell number. So again, it's making it easy for that person that's like running around and just trying to contact you. So I would say, I don't know if you agree, Marissa, but I would say just put the cell number.
Definitely. Less questions for the employer. You don't need them to wonder, would they be home at this time? Should I try their cell? If there's one phone number, there's no questions. They're going to call you there and hopefully reach you there.
Sure. And I mean, sometimes I introduce myself by text by using that cell number. You know, I'll introduce Amy Feldbaum Associates. I would love to, you know, talk to you. So, okay. So email address. Again, this is not the time to put fun and creative email addresses. I would keep it simple. I would keep your name, your first and last name, maybe at a Gmail account. Maybe you have a separate email for this whole job search that you're going to do. Maybe you keep it separate.
Yeah, and the email address, just like the phone number, as the voicemail should be professional, the email should be professional and reflect you. And when I say that, you, just your name, even just adding those numbers, I see it all the time. I know what that number means. It's usually a birth year.
Right.
And now you've given away your age and your date of birth, which may not be a bad thing, but, you know, as a part of labor laws and, you know, we don't want discrimination. You don't want that to be held against you. So keep it simple, straightforward, first name, last name at Gmail address would work fine.
Yeah, you know, the other day I got a resume with a photo. Now, usually we get photos from people applying abroad because it's a part of their CV. And abroad, they give more personal information, like if you're married or how many kids or the year that you're born. But it was a resume in the States, and I got a picture, and then I got high school, you know, from the beginning in 1970. It was a really interesting resume. So, again, I would not do any photos. And keep the email address simple.
So speaking about that, just to kind of get a visual, you know, what does that look like, just to kind of bring that to life a little bit. As you can see, here's a very basic example, very straightforward, and you'll decide what's right for you in terms of how much space is my contact information taking up. It's really going to depend on what's the content in your resume.
I love this. I think, do you think it's a 12 font, 12-point font?
A 12-point font would be a great choice for a resume. The name, a little bit bigger, perhaps 14 or 16.
Sure.
A 12-point standard, easy to read.
This is great. I'm not even wearing my glasses when I'm looking at this. Thank you. Okay.
So moving on from there, traditionally for students, but not for everyone, an objective statement may follow. And I really want to stress here that it's optional, because this is something that we both have very strong feelings about. You know, you have to be a little careful with an optional, with an objective. What are your thoughts on that?
You know, sometimes I read them, and you know, after I interview the person, I go back to read them, and then sometimes we'll see objective statement as, you know, owning a restaurant. I've always wanted to own my restaurant. That's the objective, or operate my own catering company. And I'm thinking, okay, but we're sending you out for a job at this restaurant or at this hotel. So you would call that like a long-term objective, right?
Yeah, you know, that's talking a little bit more in the future than the employer needs to know. You want to be in the here and now in terms of your short-term goal as related to this position. So you need to be really careful with an objective. If you're going to do it, if it makes sense for you, if you feel like you need that one-liner on the top of your resume to sort of explain, you know, the rest of your resume, especially if your experience may not directly relate to the future goal, you know, you might just want to spell it out. And if you're going to do that, be very specific. Be very to the point, clear and concise. And another one of these little resume rules, avoiding personal pronouns, which makes it a little more difficult. So in terms of that, you know, you can use it to tell a story and kind of connect the dots, but I want to show you some samples of what would work as effective objective statements. And you can see off the bat that none of them are much more than a sentence. So I strongly encourage you to push yourself to see, can we do this in one sentence, or barely even a sentence, really, it's almost a fragment because there's no I, there's no my in there. And, you know, taking a look at it, you get an idea of what the person is looking for, and it gives a little bit of a specific of what area, like a little focus.
I love this. I mean, because if I'm the client and I'm looking for an event planner, and I'm like the general manager and I have to report up to the owner. I'm showing the resume and it's so basic, but that person's looking like, oh, Jane, the objective is the event planner. Oh, we have an event planner position. Oh, let's go and read further. The whole goal of the resume is for them to keep reading and to understand the through line, the thread of the resume, and if it makes sense. So all of this, like, this jumps out.
And again, just, it's to reiterate the fact that it was because these are focused.
Mm-hmm.
That's why they jump out. What you want to steer clear of are those more generic, seeking professional growth. Those aren't really saying much about you and the job that you want right now. So if you're going to do it, I would just say, avoid being generic about it. And if you are very general and you're not too sure what your objective is right now and you're applying to several different positions, and I see this a lot for recent grads. You may not know at that point where you want to go with your career. Then just steer away from it, because if you do put it on there and it's different for every job, now you might be changing your resume at every point and run the risk of sending the wrong resume, with the wrong objective to the wrong person. So, rather to be safe than sorry, and in this case, use it only when it really makes sense because you have that focus there. And so again, if you were to look at it, following the contact information, short, sweet, simple.
Love it, love it. Okay.
So moving on to education.
The education, again, I would keep it simple and clear. So your institution, and you're gonna actually, MSU. You're not gonna write MSU, right? You're gonna write Michigan State University. That's a common. Do you see that a lot, where people are just using the abbreviations?
Definitely, because they feel like they've been calling it that. All of their friends know that.
Right.
People in that local area know of it. But you have to think of beyond that and spell out abbreviations. Make it clear and simple, because if you're applying to someplace in New York City, we may not know that.
Sure, and I think you bring up something, very interesting. The comment, all my friends know it. This is you want to, again, baby-proof it and make it easy so I don't have to look up or feel embarrassed that I'm not sure what college that is, right? Because I'm reading it for like 2 seconds. I'm like, okay, what college is that? Where is that? So we're going to name it. Michigan State University. Where is it? It's in East Lansing, Michigan. So would we actually spell out Michigan, or would we write MI?
So this is the only thing that I think is okay to abbreviate on a resume, because everyone should have learned their state abbreviations.
Yeah.
So that's the only thing that I think is okay to abbreviate. But it wouldn't be wrong, and it certainly wouldn't hurt you if you spelled it out. So
okay. So I think that there's a gray area there. I think I would love it spelled out, but I think you're right. Everyone should know where it is. But okay. Degree, your certification, I think that this is where everyone should spell it out, right? No BA, no BS, Bachelor of Science, it should be spelled out.
I think it should be spelled out. And then this is the case where sometimes people break those rules because they were tight for space or something like that, but do your best to be spelling everything out. It's a formal document.
Sure, and I think, everything, again, what Marissa and I are saying, it's like one perspective, and then you're going to make changes, like what Marissa said, if you can't fit it all in, don't think, oh, well, they said to spell it out, I have to spell it out, and then that's 2 pages. So don't take everything that we say literally. It's, an overview. Area of study. So again, you're going to talk about or restate what area that you study. Can you give an example of that?
Yeah, definitely. A lot of times if we're doing, for example, an undergraduate degree, you would have a major, but then you might also have minors, and sometimes there are certifications within your degree. So you just want to draw attention to that because, maybe Bachelor's of Science, but, what was the actual major? What did you study?
Sure, and I love to see, all areas of studies are, they can transition you into the actual hospitality field. I love to see psychology. When I know someone that has studied psychology for hospitality, I'm like, great. Like people, you understand how human beings work. So don't steer away from that area of study, writing it, typing it up, if you don't think that it has to do with hospitality. Graduation date, expected graduation. I think it's really important if you're still in school to tell us when you're graduating, so we know when you're available for full-time work.
Yeah, the employer wants to know when you'll be finishing. So your best bet is to approximate what that month and year would be.
Okay. So this is one again that we kind of disagree on.
So now this is a place where you have the opportunity to show off what might be a very respectable GPA. And what makes a good GPA is in flux right now. It used to be 3.0. Now people are really saying 3.5 and above. Certainly you have something like a 4.0, something you're proud of, and you want to put it on. I say if it's not taking up too much space and you're a recent grad, go ahead and put it on there.
I'm saying let it go, let it go, let it go, let it go. But again, if you just graduated, maybe you can put it on there. But soon after that, we're out in the real world now. It's not about the grade point. It's about hardcore experience.
And again, I just think to balance that before you have that experience,
right.
For some people, filling in the blanks is like, well, I did have a stellar GPA. So see what makes sense for you at that moment in time.
Agreed. You have an excellent point. I just want to let you know that. Yeah.
So similarly, if you have any type of honors that are associated with your education, you could pop this in there as well. But again, it's not mandatory to have your GPA on there, especially if it's not something you're particularly proud of. And don't worry about that so much because as Amy was saying, once you get into the career, into the real world, your experience is going to be what people are really focusing on. The education, it has to be there, but chances are they'll take a quick glance to make sure you have the education,
right.
And then move on to see, well, what can they do? Where have they worked? That's what they're looking for.
Exactly.
But just to give you a little visual of what that might look like in terms of translating onto the resume, could be something like this. You see it's very deliberate that the name of the school was bolded, very orderly. Pierre did spell it out.
Yes, thank you.
Texas also, it's a nice short word. It fit nice and neatly. The fact of the matter is we're going to focus a lot today on the content. Once you have the content down, then you look at the formatting. On here, I cheated a little bit. I did put a BS here because this person had an extremely long name for a major.
It's very long. Yep.
So, you want to get it all on there, but then if you're going to go crazy just trying to fit it on the line and you're running out of space, you're only working with this one-page document, at that point, when you make those small decisions, I always like to think, is it going to make or break me?
Sure.
This won't break you.
Absolutely not. No.
So just do your best.
Okay, content, the experience. I read a lot of resumes that go on and on, these long, terrific, flowery sentences, and I am like, please just make it easy and give me what I call like the nuggets of information. So employer name, I'll give you, 2 examples. Let's say Danny Meyer, wonderful Danny Meyer, Shake Shack. We have them in the East, right? The hamburger and all the beautiful restaurants that he has. The company name, Hospitality Group. So if I worked at Shake Shack, the umbrella is going to be Union Square Hospitality Group. The city and state and the title. Again, with the title, I wouldn't fudge it. If you were a manager, don't say general manager. If you were an event manager, don't write director of events because this will all come back to haunt you later on. So second example, Baskin-Robbins, Farmington Hills, Michigan, manager, dates of employment. Now, dates of employment, what we see a lot is people kind of squeezing out the end of the year. So let's say you ended really December 2014, but you put your end date as, maybe you didn't even put the month, maybe you just said 2015. And recently this happened where we were like closing a deal, Marissa, and we were just like, I don't understand this. He says that he left in 2014 or 2015, but he's ending it in 2014. So it was very confusing. So at the end of the day, don't fudge. Now, job responsibilities. So let's just use Baskin-Robbins because it's fun. I was a manager. I'm going to give the nuggets of information. If I was responsible for $3 million at Baskin-Robbins, I don't think Baskin-Robbins does anywhere near that. But again, you're giving the nuggets of information. If you had 20 scoopers reporting to you, you would write that down. If you use a certain computer system, you would put that down. again, I want like active verbs that kind of pop out and go, oh, he did that, she did that. Does that make sense?
Definitely. And at that point, I really want to emphasize a few things. With that employer name, also instead of an abbreviation again, because you think everyone knows it, definitely spell it out somewhere that's outside of your area. Because in New York City, we might know USHG if you're in the hospitality industry as Union Square Hospitality Group, but someone in Minnesota is not going to know that. So keep that in mind. And then going forward, I think what the points that Amy was trying to bring home is honesty. You need to be honest and accurate to the best of your ability with all of this information, because when it comes to time for a reference check or maybe the information's even on the internet, whatever it is, you want it to be consistent. And that's why with the dates, we also say, if you can put it should be months and the years.
Right.
Because starting in January versus starting December is 12 months, so that does matter.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah. And also a little bit just on the job responsibilities is that some people will just take a look at their job description, and that's a great place. It was a job you had a few years ago, and you're a little rusty. What exactly did I do there? You can start there, and you can have a basis there, but then you want to provide the context, and you don't want it to just be what you did, those standard job duties, but you also want to highlight accomplishments. So what did you do that made you stand out in that role?
Right.
How did you do it? Or how was that job duty performed differently at the location you were at as opposed to at another place? So these are all things you really want to think about in terms of tailoring your resume to know your audience. So now, one of the parts, that's just the facts. That's what you need to have there. Where did you work? When did you work there? But what I find the most challenging and this is not just for students, for anyone, is describing the job. How will I do it? So here is just an outline in terms of, a structure, kind of keep it consistent. One thing, definitely starting with action verbs. We do recommend bullets as well. As you look, you'll see the incorporation of a lot of bullets in this slideshow, and that's, not an accident. And it's easier to read in bullets. So in terms of wondering, well, how do I start the bullet? Anything you have ever done at a job was work. It was an action. So again, I'd avoid words like work to start up those bullets and be more specific. Similarly, and another point on that, action verb lists are all over the internet. There are great ones out there that are organized according to job function. It's okay to use that. Or you can also even, if you find a lot of your verbs are repeating because you assisted, hopefully you helped, or, some other word that's similar, use your synonym lookup in your Word document. But you also want to keep in mind that you're using the appropriate tense. This is another one of my stickler resume rules, where if you are currently performing the job function, use present tense. If you are no longer performing that job duty and you don't work there anymore, put it in the past tense.
Do not see consistency. I feel like that is a major error where people are not consistent.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people, they just don't know it, but that's the standard, that makes sense. Follow with it again because it gets confusing for an employer.
Sure. And so you could just Google action verbs.
Yes, there are some great lists out there, action verbs for resume. And what I like to use those for is sometimes just to look at the list separate from your resume, because you might look at a list and remember, oh, I have facilitated, right? I just never thought to use that word. So kind of a great brainstorming tool, a good springboard, so that you're getting some variety. Because when employers are reading these resumes, what happens is that repetition of terms, and now I was a psychology major, the repetition actually causes a sort of mind-numbing, like a bored kind of effect, and they may not even realize that's happening. So that's why that's a little psychology trick to keep their brain in tune, because there's a variety of words keeping them awake.
So that's what keeps me awake at those resumes. They use all those different verbs. That's excellent. That's excellent advice, Marissa.
So a little just more on that, how do I get this to be concise yet descriptive, which I know is an oxymoron, but it's the best way I can pose it, and I know that's a challenge. Because you don't want those bullets to run on and on and on. These are not meant to be paragraphs. This is not a time for storytelling. You have limited space here. Make sure you're stating what you did And the big one that the employer is going to wonder, and there's a reason I capitalize this, and I don't do that a lot, how you did it. That's what's going to make your resume unique. That's the difference of when I see resumes, and I can tell that there was a job description and it was copied and pasted. Mm-hmm. It's very generic. But once you decide to provide a context and show how you did it differently, now I can really understand what you did, and I know you took some time to write this down.
Sure. When I see the job description that's cut and pasted, I'm like, next. So I'm on to the next resume.
It's very obvious. You know, it's very easy to see that. So make it personal, make it unique, and also make it specific. This is where it really helps to give people an idea, especially if we're talking about, say, volume and planning here. There's a difference of planning a small, intimate gathering for 15 people as opposed to a large-scale event for 600 guests. So put those numbers in. You know, numbers are universal. It really helps people understand whether we're talking in this situation about guests attending events or size of event space, or even maybe budgets that you needed to work with. I'd like to know how much money you're able to handle and, you know, what kind of budget you could work in, because that might be the reality in your next position, that you're going to be given those guidelines, and how do you work within it.
I think that's terrific because, you know, when we're filling those director of catering roles, and if it's more boutique and more high-end and attention to detail, and you're dealing with, you know, presidents and heads of firms, and you're dealing with 20 or 30 person parties, it's much different than when then you're going to a museum of Met and you're doing a party for 3,000, and it's a totally different job. So be specific.
Yeah, because the idea is an event planner is not an event planner, is not an event planner. You know, there's so much variety within there, and that's what's going to create this image and this presentation of who you are on paper by providing the scope.
Do you have, can we see that, like what that looks like on the resume? Let's see.
Let's take a little look, because this is an interesting experience section. We have a large group here. This person needed to separate out because their current experience was not related. So if that's your situation, then you go ahead and make these separate situations. Clearly structured, formatted, very deliberate.
Terrific. Okay.
Marissa, can I interject real quick with a question?
Sure.
So I love that you guys emphasized using numerical values to really illustrate the scope of you know, kind of your experience. Can you give the students some examples of what are some questions that they can ask themselves to help them kind of put that you know, skill together, in the sense of they may just say, oh, I helped at the front desk. What are some questions that they can ask themselves to really elaborate on any point that they're putting on the resume to make sure that they do incorporate those numerical values?
Well, I would say there, if you, for example, helped at a front desk, now I would think like, well, what kind of help did you provide? How did you provide that help? How many people a day were you providing help to? Were you answering phones? How many phone lines were you answering? So just, you know, giving that specific, like kind of going the step further, giving a little bit more to show me how you did it differently from the next person. Because especially, again, words like help, you know, again, that's where you might also think about using different verbs. Like, did you just help, or did you direct people to the appropriate person? Because help is a very broad word. So again, I think ask yourself, you know, is that the accurate verb, or is that a little, can I be more specific about the type of help I provided?
Brilliant. Thank you.
So briefly, in terms of building your resume, you know, it's to gain experience.
So you can gain experience by volunteering, by, you know, at the college that you are at right now, there's so many different avenues where you can just volunteer and network. And it's all about networking, because that one person that you're going to meet may lead to another person, may lead to that job offer, helping out in your community. Any type of work for experience, they're like building blocks, and they just, all of a sudden, you have, where you didn't know maybe anyone in the business, then you know like 10 people in the business, because you're being active and you're helping out. Volunteering, I would say, is number one.
Definitely. Think about the skills that are required for your desired job and start gaining them in any way possible. So just a brief bit in terms of some optional sections, if relevant for you. These are other areas to be on a resume: certifications, honors, professional affiliations, or on-campus involvement. This will really help people know that you're involved, that you know what's going on in the industry. So here you could see an example, and there are a lot of certifications that may be really necessary or relevant or could really boost your qualifications. That if they need someone who has that certification, you know, food handler certification, and you do and the next person doesn't, you know, right there, that's a boon for you. So definitely pursue the ones that are relevant for you and make sure they're listed appropriately on the resume as such. Lastly, a skill section is good to have. This is a short section, straightforward to the point. I would avoid soft skills, things such as great planning skills. We would hope you had that if you were an event planner, or great organizational skills. Be more specific in terms of hard skills that could be measured, such as computer programs or languages, and make sure to show your level. As you can see, there's, you know, various levels. Even knowing something to the basic extent might be good for an employer to know that they don't have to start from scratch with you in terms of training. And it might look something like this.
Yeah, I was interviewing someone today that just left off all their computer systems out. So we were, you know, I was trying to pull it out of him. I'm like, what computer systems have you used? But I wouldn't anymore put just Excel, right? I mean, everyone should know Excel. What is your feeling about that?
I think Word, right? We would hope, you know, a lot of people do know it. I think just expanding on how well you know each program.
Sure. Because
it really depends, you know, you just don't want people to assume. A lot of people say, oh, of course I know Office. But, you know, there's a lot more programs within Office than people realize.
Right.
Like Access is a less popular one. So I just think just being specific to the job that you're applying, might that be useful? It might.
Terrific. Okay. Cover letters, really? So I do everything backwards. You know, I meet the candidate, then read the resume, then go back and read the cover letters. Do people still write cover letters?
Definitely coming from a university setting, a cover letter is a necessity. I tell them never give a resume just a resume unless you're handing it in person. But if you're sending this electronically, you have to complement that resume because the resume is about what you bring to the table. But now the cover letter is answering the question, why are you applying to this position? Why are you qualified for this position? And why do you want to work in this company? It also is a chance, you know, resume is a very structured document. You may be limited to a page if you're still early on in your career. You don't have time to be descriptive. Now you can expand on that objective and really tailor this to each employer, and that does mean writing somewhat, you know, separate letters for each employer, so that they're seeing you took the time and really have thought about your ability to fulfill this role and if you're a good fit.
And if you're a good writer, I would imagine, right? I mean, it's very important also to be error-free and write, you know, terrific sentences. So.
And, you know, a lot of people get scared, oh my God, I'm not a great writer, but even to be said, you don't have to be a great writer, but you need to be passionate and you need to share that you've thought long and hard about, you know, that you've looked at the job description really, that you've thought about if you could fulfill that role. Down for people to take that intimidation factor out of it, and it could be done, you know, pretty straightforward in a few paragraphs, 3 to 4 would work.
So we're talking about, most of these are electronic, so it's actually not an attachment anymore, right? It's going to be in the body of the email.
Yes, use the body of the email for that. It makes sense. You wouldn't send someone an empty email with a resume attachment. How would they know which position you're applying for? Maybe they have 5 open positions right now. So be thoughtful about your email subject line. You know, wedding event planner, you know, put the job title in there.
Not like read now. I saw one the other day. It was like read now. Okay, is that spam? I was very confused. So it has to make sense.
Yeah, you have to be specific so that the person knows that they should open this email because you're right, they could be afraid of spam. Similarly, addressing your letter formally, I would do your best to find out who's the hiring manager and dear Mr. or Mrs. And if not, then something more generic like to whom it may concern, but make sure it's formal. 3 to 4 paragraphs when to go through each of them and how you can approach them.
Okay. Introduction. You want to state the position for which you're applying. It has to make sense, right? You saw this job ad. You want, you know, don't talk about the position that you're not ready for. You want to state the position. So if you're looking for, you know, this is catering sales, you're interested in the catering sales manager at the venue. You're going to introduce yourself and your current position. So where you are, if you're a student, and would you say that you're going to talk about when you're graduating too?
Definitely. You know, I'm currently a student and I expect to graduate in June of 2015.
Okay, super. So, and then you're going to explain your interest in the company. This should like jump out, and this is where you talk about passion, right? And using those active verbs that like, wow, this person has interest and knowledge, you know, do a little research on the company, so it can pop.
Research is key here. What I will say is this will separate you from a lot of other candidates who are just applying sort of willy-nilly and sending out 50 a day. If you've taken the time, visit the website, you know a little bit about what they're doing, what's special about their company. Flattery, it kind of shows them that you took the time to care. So this really will set you apart. And that doesn't have to be long, a sentence or two, just to show that you know what they're about. If not everyone's going to do that, and right there you'll grab them right in the beginning and they'll want to read on.
Right.
So this is the part where I get a lot of questions on in terms of, which of my experience do I highlight for the resume, for the cover letter? You don't want to repeat the resume verbatim. You don't need to do that. Instead, reference the job description. Look at the key skills that they're asking. And I like to do this seriously with a highlighter. I highlight the ones I know that I have. Then you're going to use that to think of when have I done that in the past? What example can I provide that will demonstrate that I'm capable of performing that function? Be specific, give examples. Again, you get some more time to use some adjectives here, describing how you did it, what was your personal approach, what was your passion. Again, come through here as well when you start to use your language in terms of, why you created an event in a certain way. But you really want to show why you're a strong candidate, and instead base this description and this paragraph on what they said they were looking for, because in their mind that's what they're scanning for. So you just need to give that to them, and that's how you'll reference it and put it in context. You don't want to just grab those lines from your resume.
Okay, so if I was applying for a job that they were looking for a catering sales manager who could handle high volume, and I have on my resume that I handled high volume, could I talk about a very specific maybe party that I did that was like 3,000 people for a turkey trot jog before Thanksgiving, right? Could I kind of talk about that?
Definitely. You have a little bit more space to go into, what was the event like? How did people enjoy it? You don't get that room on the resume.
Okay, good.
So really briefly, now this is something that's also much used on an interview. How to approach that? I say follow this. Every work, action that we did could probably be thought of in this way. What was the situation? What did you do? And what was the outcome? So PAR, problem, action, result. If you're not sure how to describe, maybe use this as a little guideline to kind of get the pieces of the puzzle together and put it all together.
You're going to make me read all cover letters now. Everyone's going to have such a great cover letter. I'm going to be reading the cover letters and the resume.
We hope so. So lastly, in the closing, very brief. This could be done in 3 sentences. Nice to kind of, restate why you were interested overall, give them a reference point. But what you need to do is express your interest in an interview. The reason you wrote this cover letter is to convince them to read the resume. And once they've seen that, you want to be called in for an interview, which hopefully leads to the job in there. And again, thanking the employer from their time, putting a nice bow on it.
Simple, like best regards, sincerely, nothing too creative in the very ending, right? I've seen like culinary regards, and I just kind of stay away from those types.
I think that could be the same for every job. Okay. So that's much, to your point.
All right, super. And great. So the references. Oh, and the paper. Real quickly on the resume paper, if we're doing it snail mail, then resume paper, regular, like from the 1980s, right? Just like regular standard computer paper. I think more event people or more in the creative advertising or marketing, they want to go with like a thick stock paper or envelope. Again, really just simple. You might want to write personal and confidential on the lower left side of the envelopes, try to get it through. But again, simple paper. Okay, so the references, sometimes I see references on the actual resume, and I would kind of steer away from that when you're asked for, can I have some references? Then you provide them with another piece of paper that the headliner is references. And first, before you put references on, you want to ask permission from the people that you're putting down, right? So you're going to ask your professors, ask other employers, may I put you down as a reference? You may even, if you're interviewing for a very specific role, you might tell them, I put you down, can I put you down? I'm interviewing for this job. Pick people that you have an ongoing relationship, or pick people that will say wonderful things about you, right? Because these are easy, these are regular references. There's a whole new thing, blind referencing, where people are reference checking you with who you don't put down or who you worked with in the past. What do you think?
I find that that's more in very high-level positions, that they will be doing that. So there's, that just expectation to be prepared that they may do that. I think for the most part, going into like maybe entry level, you're probably okay with the fact that they will assume you don't need to even write a line on your resume saying references, provided upon request. That's really a space filler. And you really don't want anyone else's contact information on your resume. You don't want other people's confidential contact information there. So I think the big point is a nice, new, fresh piece of paper.
Yes.
Same heading as your resume. So it looks like a sort of personalized stationery almost in a way. Very, again, easy to read, very structured, very consistent, just like the resume would have been.
Right. And, sometimes I get references like Susan Smith and the number. And I'm like, okay, who is Susan Smith? So you're going to put the name, Susan Smith, the relationship, so maybe she was your boss, and her title, her current job title, which may be different, and you might need to explain that. The contact information, which is an email address and phone number, because I would always email them first before I would just call them. But again, we're like baby-proofing, making everything easy for the person that's reading.
And just ask your references, what they're more comfortable with. If you can, it'd be nice, you'd want both a phone number and an email address, because you should have been in touch with them, and they should be probably expected to be getting a phone call with this. So, put in as much information as possible so that if they were reached by phone, that email could be sent. Again, it's about making it easy for the employer to do what they have to do so that you can get hired.
It's making it easy, having fun, in closure with all this, having fun with this, like, wow, I get to write my resume, I'm graduating, I get to do a cover letter, and this is going to be something that I'm going to be doing for my whole life, because no matter how experienced you are, you're going to need that cover letter, you're going to need that resume and references, right, Marissa?
Definitely. It's how can I make myself be the most appealing candidate for this position by just using words on the paper. So I think that believe me, this is something I think we could each speak an hour on resumes. But hopefully that gives you a working place to begin from. So certainly we're open to any kind of questions or further discussion about any of the things we spoke about.
Marissa and Amy, I want to give you guys both a round of applause on behalf of the Student Event Planners Association. This was phenomenal nuggets that I know so many of these members and students are going to be benefiting from, and even non-SEPA members. This is golden. I do have some questions for you guys.
Sure. Oh, there we are. Okay.
There you are. Okay. When would be a good time to start thinking about, getting credentials to build your resume? When would be the right time to start creating a resume if you're in school? And how often should you be updating your resume?
Can I say yesterday? It's never too soon to start doing that. Get something on paper, go to the career services in your college, and then you'll see where you're missing. And if you don't have that experience, get it, volunteer, do what you can. When we say experience, I also wanted to point out the fact that experience doesn't mean it had to have been paid. Right? An employer cares that you know how to do something. And you could have developed that skill as a volunteer. In my first job, I was not yet doing what I wanted to do. I spent my time volunteering to build those skills because my day job just wasn't really telling the story. And that works too because I had the skills.
So we recommend at 8:03 writing the resume tonight, or actually 7:03 because it's 8 o'clock in New York.
We're in New York City.
There you go. There you go. And how often, even after you graduate, should you be updating your resume? Even your LinkedIn. Let's talk about LinkedIn.
Right. So anytime that you change a job for LinkedIn, I think that you should update, but it's kind of like when you write a paper. You're never really finished with it. Even when you turn it in and you get it back and you look at it and you're like, wow, you know what, I can refine that. It's like a work in progress. No matter how many years of experience, we could be fast forwarding this in like 15 years, you can always work on your LinkedIn page or your resume and fine tune it.
Yeah, I would say don't just wait until you're applying for a job, because you never know when you might meet someone and they have an opportunity. Maybe you weren't looking. Maybe it's not the best time, but there's this amazing opportunity. If you update it every time you do something new, it will already be there. It'll be easy. And this way, if you met them and you want to get it to them that night, you're not scrambling, you're not doing it last minute, in which case you might be at risk of errors in there.
Because I'm going to call you, the recruiter is going to call you like when you least expect it, and then you're going to be like at an event, working the event, or you're at school finishing finals, and oh my God, she wants a resume, when am I going to do the resume? But Marissa, you have a plan, and you're going to be working on the resume every step of the way.
And keep it handy, have that document. A lot of people I know will save it on their phone if they need to quickly get it out to someone. We live in an information age where everything happens instantaneously, and if they're waiting for you and they're getting someone else's,
Absolutely spot on. And even guys, in talking about LinkedIn and analytics, more often you guys are in your own LinkedIn account and updating content, the actual higher up, you're going to find, be found in searches as well. And you always want to have options. Even if you are happy and solidified in a particular position, you never know. Nothing is guaranteed, and there are opportunities that do come along. And you were so spot on with the scramble. You know what I mean? To get that resume together and somehow still look professional, like you got your stuff together. So yes, very, very important. I would personally recommend anytime between 3 to 6 months, you guys should be revisiting your resume and and it actually should be a goal for yourself of, if you haven't progressed in a 3 to 6 month period, then you're doing something wrong, right? If you're not out there actively building your portfolio, then that's not a good thing. I'm going to do a shameless plug real quick, just in relation to the Student Event Planners Association. Several times in this webinar, you guys have mentioned volunteer opportunities and going out there and getting experience, which is what employers are looking for. Guys, leverage the Opportunities Program. You all are required to do a minimum of 4 hours each semester, and you have access to a listing for volunteer opportunities, internship opportunities, and job opportunities that can all give you guys incredible experience. And I personally, I always don't tell your parents, but I've been an advocate too of, I would rather you participate in 4 volunteer opportunities, different types of events, than 1 internship opportunity. Get out there, try it all, and that way you guys can gain a lot of different experience and connections, right? Same thing you guys mentioned about references. Making sure that it's appropriate. I've had some people in the past, I'm sure same with you guys in the positions you've been in, where certain people have asked you, hey, will you be a reference? And you've never worked with them. Maybe you were college buddies or something, And so you make sure that you guys are asking the correct people who can be credible references for you. And same thing you guys mentioned about kind of forewarning, right? Asking permission, but also if you're actively looking for a job and you know that there's a potential that that person you asked 6 months ago, if you could put him down as a reference, might be getting a call, I would advise that you shoot them an email or give them a phone call and say, hey, look, I applied for this position and they might be calling you, right? So at least you can be prepared when that person receives that phone call. That's also really good. When should you follow up? Let's say you do send a resume to a particular business. When would be an appropriate time to follow up, and how?
So I think we may have varying opinions on this. One thing I would say is look at the job description. A lot of times you will read, no phone calls, please. So first and foremost, follow their instruction. If they do not make that phone number accessible, it's because they do not want you to call. In another situation, if it seems appropriate and it's, and they are accessible, then I would say a week.
Yeah, no, I would agree with you. I would say 1 week or 2 weeks, and then just leave it alone. Sometimes people post, but they're not actively looking right then, or something happens and that they were looking. There's so many variables. I say to candidates, think less and do more. So it's all about the sales, meaning send out a lot of different resumes and think less about it. I mean, you're definitely going to try to follow up, but if you don't get an answer, move on to the next one, then it wasn't right.
Just exercise professional judgment in terms of not being too, you don't want to be aggressive at all, really. You know, if you sent it out there, I could understand maybe you're worried it got lost in cyberspace, but, you know, balance out that concern between, well, what are the chances it got lost? Probably pretty slim. You just don't want to come off as too over anxious about it.
Definitely, definitely. And I think keeping in perspective, guys, depending on the company that you're applying to, how large that company is and their HR department, is that a corporate job? Is that, you know, a small agency job? You know, what is their bandwidth? Because I know some corporations, it can take up to 3 months for them to even get back to you, right? So just, you know, keeping that in mind, and definitely, as you mentioned, Amy, put all your feelers out there. You know, don't just, you know, put your bank all on one particular position. That being said, when should you start distributing your resume? What is it? Is there a time that's too early? Like for graduating seniors, should it be 3 months, 6 months in advance? When should you start putting your resume out?
I think it all depends on when you can start working. I mean, if you can start working, if you're graduating but can start working, I mean, sometimes things happen really fast. I mean, sometimes there's a posting and there's an opening and you can be hired within a month. Other times it's a slow process. Usually it's a slow process. And there's a lot of interviews. There should be a lot of interviews. If you're being hired on the spot, that's a yellow flag. I mean, you should have, and this is a whole other webinar, but there should be 3 or 4 different interviews. So I think, again, it's a personal. If you can't start working, if you're taking the summer off, you're not going to start sending out those resumes.
And I think also the idea is maybe 6 months of keeping your eyes open, because maybe they do want a grad. But if this is your dream job and you feel like you are really well qualified for it, if you see something, jump on it, apply. Remember, you have nothing to lose. But again, if it's not the right time and you're not going to be around, you know, then be careful about that. But think about, you know, what makes sense in terms of when you can actually start working.
Sure. Yeah.
Great answer. What is, you mentioned, you know, having easy accessibility to your resume to be able to forward on to someone as an example. What are some kind of do's and don'ts? What are some acceptable environments or, you know, scenarios to be able to share your resume and others that maybe you wouldn't recommend?
Well, I'm going to start with this, and then you can kind of feel, because this is something that's not exactly what you're asking, but that I realized we didn't address. The document itself, to having a PDF handy of it, you don't want something that could be edited or that might appear differently from what you intended. So I would say having it accessible in a PDF version.
Yes. Good point.
And I think that whatever you see that looks interesting, and I'm not, again, sure if this is your question, but it could be something that you see online, like a Monster ad or Ladders or something, a catering site for job postings, a school posting. But you could be walking, you never know when that opportunity is going to be, right? You could be at a networking event and meet someone and they give you your card and you're going to send an email right away, right? Like, you know, it was just, I'm so grateful to have met you. I want, you know, I hope it's okay if I'm sending your my resume. Feel free to call me. I'm graduating. You give your little elevator pitch. So I think I'm all about like sending that resume and that there's no boundaries, right? I mean, if you keep it simple and you're not stalking them after, send it out, send it out. You know, if you're walking down the street and you see this great, don't worry about seeing a job posting. Go online, see who the visionary is, and introduce yourself to the head. Maybe skip HR. Okay, HR is wonderful. We love HR. But you might want to just introduce yourself to the person who's running that party, who's looking for the assistant, or her assistant called in sick, right? So jump on that opportunity and send out that resume.
And I think, like what you were saying, if you meet someone and it's maybe not exactly a networking time, you know, that's okay, because you're not handing your resume to them there and then. You're introducing yourself, giving that, you know, brief spiel about yourself, and then you'll follow up with an email. So I think that that's fine. It's not that you're kind of shoving it in their face because you're so, you know, and I understand the enthusiasm, how exciting it can be to meet someone who has the opportunity to offer you that job. But as long as you're getting their contact information and following up, then why not send it on?
And do it in an elegant way. Everything must be done in a correct way.
Right. I think posture and not seeming overly desperate is really, really important when delivering that. You know, making sure that it's a Absolutely, absolutely. And one of my last questions, visuals on a resume. So you mentioned kind of personalizing your resume a little bit. Is it acceptable to use a personalized logo or logos for maybe companies or organizations you're part of? What's your opinion on that?
Well, I really steer away, you know, and this is, I do come from an artistic background, but I sort of lose my, you know, artistic side when I get to the resume. Now, a logo is one thing. Your logo will be in your LinkedIn profile, and I do think that's nice for brand visibility, like you recognize it right away. I'm still just of the nature where I become very boring when I'm doing my resume side. It's not where I'm as expressive as I'd like to be, because I just don't want anything to interfere with the content. And not only that, in a practical side, I feel like the space it might take up, like if you put that there, you know, unless you're really good with like maneuvering it and it's not too large, because I don't want to just be, yes, I want to see the companies you've worked for, but I don't want to look at it and now my eye is only drawn to the visuals.
I think you'll have that opportunity in the interview process to be creative. If you have that third or fourth interview, they may ask you for some materials or do some type of assessment, or, you know, is something, and that's when you can put in your logos, but I would keep the logos away. That's just a preference that both of us.
Yeah, I always err on the more cautious side, you know, of being like professional. Like if you ever, basically in general, the interview, anything, if you're questioning, like, should I do that? Like, I tend to be more cautious, but again, we're not to say that that's the only way to do it. Some people are risk takers, and that works for them, and that made them stand out. So I think that you need to also think about your audience and who you're applying to. So if they are people who really are think out of the box, and you really need to show them, like, I'm not afraid to do this crazy wild thing, then maybe, you know, again, I'm always afraid to tell people no, like never, but I wouldn't do that.
They're not like deal breakers. It doesn't mean that you're not going to get the job if you put the logo. You're not going to get the job if you have an error, like if you spell college wrong, like I saw a resume the other day. Then you're not going to get the job. But the logo or the not the logo, again, there's a gray area where you find two other people in this field, they may have a totally different opinion.
Again, I think it's the will it make or break me, and like, you know, if it's a risk at all putting it on there, I usually just go on the safe side. Let your skills and qualifications be what draws someone in instead of pretty pictures.
Right. Okay, two last questions. I promise. I'm so sorry. I know we ran over time, but this is amazing. What about like a personal website or LinkedIn or Twitter or some place where they could access additional information about you? Is that acceptable, not acceptable? What's your opinion on it?
So I steer away as first starting out, like personal websites. I interview like a lot of chefs and catering people, and if they had their own website, I feel like that's too much too early on. And the same thing with Twitter. I think in social media in general, you have to be extremely careful. What's on your tweeting? I don't know, would you agree about that?
You don't need to put your LinkedIn, because they could type your name in and find your LinkedIn. So I don't think that would be, or same thing with Twitter. In terms of the website, until I think you've developed a professional reputation and you have some really nice, and when I say nice, if you're taking pictures of whatever it might be, favors you designed or a food display that you created, those should be professional grade photographs. So it is nice to have a portfolio online and to have something accessible to show, you know, to kind of bring things to life. As a student, I'm not sure you would have, you know, you may or may not have enough to warrant that, but I would really think about, you know, what are you putting up there? Is it really done professionally? And is it necessary for you to tell the story, or were you able to tell it with the fact that you created an event and drew in 500 people off the street? You know, like that speaks to me a little bit more, because it's result-oriented. You told me you put in the work and you made these awesome, unique, you know, favors, whatever it might have been, and it had a result. And as an employer, I kind of want to see that.
I keep it simple. I look for when I hire, with 2 seconds of someone coming in the room, is like a firm handshake, that energy, that urgency, that willingness to learn. Like, you know, I don't want to see the website. I want to see, like, you know, and I can see that on a resume, and I can see that on a cover letter.
Or perhaps what I have done before on an interview, maybe, or even reference in a cover letter, you know, like I am happy to bring samples of my works. So
Sure.
I think that maybe waiting until it's an appropriate point to do that. Should I cut out?
Oh, okay, sorry. Yes, absolutely. I agree with you guys. Brilliant. Last question, because I know this is so hard for so many people. The question is, what experiences are most important to include? If you held a part-time job for a long time, but you didn't do anything relevant to the job you're applying for, should you include it? How do you feel about gaps in your resume if you took off, you know, that you worked at Burger King? Like, what does that project to the employer?
Sure. So I think that I like to see the through line, the thread of the resume. So I don't like personally to see gaps. I think it's important if you like had leave, if you had, you know, to take care of an elderly parent, or if you had a child. I think that maybe you could have a small gap and explain it in an interview. But I like everything written out.
Yeah, I think the part here, as a student, I don't think the gaps are as much of an issue, or even as a recent grad, because, you know, we know you're going to school, you're moving around, you're working 3 part-time jobs, so I think it's less of an issue then. But I think as you get into the career where there is that gap, that could be a red flag. But on, you know, my end of it, in terms of sort of protecting the, you know, person, I get creative in terms of ordering the sections of experience, where if you did have to work, you know, a side job and you were worried about the gap, you know, get it on there. You don't have to go into too much detail, but again, bringing your relevant experience first, so that the first thing they're seeing, that prime real estate on the top half of the resume, is what they're looking for, and they're not getting distracted, buried at the bottom. So whatever you can do to put your best foot forward, if you need to reorder some things, then do that.
And skills are transferable. If you worked at the Gap and you're working midnight shifts, counting all those jeans, or if you're a nurse and you're working in the emergency unit, that is so transferable to hospitality. You can deal with stress. You can run those big events. The chicken goes up from 40 people to 100 million people. So I believe those skills are transferable. Don't leave them out. Those jobs.
All right. Perfect answer. Perfect answer. Well, Amy, Marissa, I cannot thank you guys enough for the time that you guys have committed. And I even also had to compliment you. I'm so excited about it, about your presentation and the draft resume. I saw that you guys included a couple of things that were very, very specific.
Thanks, Marissa. Yay, Marissa.
I loved it. So I know a lot of our Texas A&M students are going to be copying that resume verbatim. Don't be doing that.
I had a copy of that.
It was absolutely brilliant. Some hard skills that I saw that you guys put on there that SCPA students, this is a call out to you guys, you absolutely should include on your resume, are the 3D event designer capabilities. To be able to design a floor plan, not even just a basic floor plan, but a floor plan in 3D, that's going to make you stand out. That's amazing. CVent certified. Again, guys, that lasts up to 2 years, and it's free. All of you have access and memberships with both of these companies, and it's free to you. So definitely leverage those, get those certifications done. Highly recommend it. You included the Wedding and Event Institute, and we also have the Institute of Wedding and Event Design, guys, so be leveraging those certifications as well. I was so impressed. I was like, oh my gosh, that's awesome. So thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm floored. And I know so many people are going to be benefiting from this. So again, thank you guys so much once again for all of your time. Great wisdom, great nuggets. I look forward to all the feedback, and I wish you guys the very best.
Thank you very much. Have a great evening.
You too. Take care.